Hello, in this video we'll be looking at markets. We'll be looking at buyers and sellers and how they determine market prices and quantities together. All buyers and sellers of a particular good or service make up that market. Markets can be individual products, product categories, place, entire economy. In macroeconomics, we look at markets for entire economies. Aggregate supply and aggregate demand, looking at the production and purchasing of all goods and services in the nation in one year. In microeconomics, we look more on an individual level, an individual product, an individual business, maybe a particular industry. But any market that we're talking about, we're referring to all buyers and sellers of that particular good or service. Markets represent the reservation prices of both buyers and sellers. A reservation price represents the value to the buyer, the cost to the producer, and it represents a willingness to pay, so how much a buyer values an item. A reservation price is going to be the maximum that they would be willing to pay for something. A buyer's reservation price is based on the maximum value that they get out of using an item. On the seller side, their reservation price is their willingness to accept. This is going to be a minimum price, and it's going to be related to how much it costs to produce an item. As economists, we also care about things like opportunity cost. So it's going to be both implicit and explicit costs of production. When reservation prices agree, when the maximum a buyer is willing to pay is the same as the minimum a seller is willing to sell, they're going to be able to transact. As long as the buyer values it more than the cost of production, sales are going to be made. So let's look at some examples. In this first example, we've got a pumpkin spice latte. So we're going to be looking at the coffee market, maybe in Pasadena, coffee market in the United States. Specifically, this would be the pumpkin spice latte market. Pumpkin spice lattes, at least in the United States, are fairly popular in the fall months. You can get them at Starbucks, 7-Eleven, Dunkin' Donuts, Krispy Kreme, all over the place. Pumpkin spice everything. Do pumpkin spice lattes cost the same every place you purchase them? No, they don't. So the pumpkin spice latte at Starbucks is going to cost $4.55. At 7-Eleven, the same size coffee would be $2.29. Dunkin' Donuts would be $3.99. And Krispy Kreme would be $3.69. Depending on where you go to purchase this, you're going to be paying a different price, despite getting the same volume of liquid, right? The same size drink. The question is, do these all taste the same? Are these equivalent products? If you go to 7-Eleven, are you getting the same pumpkin spice latte as you would get at Starbucks? So what kind of things determine the price? Location, reputation. Are you paying $2 more at Starbucks, almost twice as much at Starbucks, so you can get the cup? It's a status symbol, maybe, walking around with that Starbucks cup. Are you paying more at Starbucks because the coffee really is better? So you're paying twice as much money at Starbucks compared to 7-Eleven because you're really getting twice the quality. Maybe you're paying for the level of caffeine, right? So it doesn't matter, what it tastes like or the volume of the actual coffee. It matters how much caffeine you're getting. So maybe you pay more at Starbucks because of the caffeine. All of these things sort of go into determining supply and demand, determining the end market equilibrium price. And so we would say that because these products all have different prices, there's got to be some kind of difference between them. It could just be consumer tastes and preferences, brand reputation, quality of the product. There's lots of things that could go into it. So throughout this lecture and other things that we discuss this semester, we're going to be kind of delving into some of those things. What makes prices different? There's an interesting article here from insider.com where they actually compared all 4 of these beverages. They went and they taste tested them, very small sample size, just like 2 or 3 people from the office, and they tasted all of them. And they said that 7-Eleven was the best. They said it tasted the best compared to Starbucks and Dunkin' Donuts. Whether or not this carries through for all people, I don't know. If 7-Eleven is really the best, why are they not charging at least the same amount as Starbucks, if not more? So let's start by looking at the demand curve. This can be a graph, it could be a table, it could be represented by an equation. All three of these things are trying to calculate or estimate consumer preferences in a particular market. Demand curves are going to be downward sloping, meaning they have a negative slope. When we look on a graph, we're going to see that we have price on the y-axis and quantity on the x-axis. The equation that we use, you could have price on the left-hand side or quantity. It just depends. A table or a schedule, you're going to have something that lists all of the individual points, price, and quantity. But for all of these things, we're going to have a negative slope, a downward sloping line. And this happens because of the substitution and income effects. So downward sloping means that price and quantity move in opposite directions. When the price goes down, the quantity demanded increases. When the price goes up, the quantity demanded decreases. So for buyers, price and quantity move in opposite directions. The substitution effect has to do with the fact that we buy more than one thing. There's trade-offs for all of our purchases. If I'm buying this one thing, it means less money that I can spend on something else. So the substitution effect tells us that as prices change in this market, it makes other goods relatively cheaper or more expensive. The income effect has to do with the purchasing power, the value of your dollar. So if I ask you, how much is $5? You're going to be thinking about what can I buy with $5? And it's going to be relative. It's going to depend upon the time, the year, the place, right? When and where we're talking about. $5 today in California is going to buy you, a cup of coffee at Starbucks. In the early 1900s, $5 would be considered a really good daily wage. So the income effect says that as prices increase, it makes you relatively poorer. As prices decrease, it makes you relatively richer. And so we're going to get this downward sloping curve because when the price drops, we're going to want to buy more of this thing because it's relatively cheaper compared to other things we purchase, and it makes us relatively wealthier. We can get more stuff for our money. Our goal as individuals is to maximize our happiness, maximize our satisfaction through consumption, and because we have limitations, limited time, limited money, limited resources, we're trying to get the most out of that at all times. So when things become cheaper, we're going to buy more of it. When it becomes more expensive, we're going to buy less of it. So for buyers, the reservation price is going to be the highest price that they're willing to pay at any given quantity. So the law of demand says that as price falls, quantity demanded rises. So the law of demand is that we have this negative slope, this downward sloping line. Each price change represents 1 point on the curve. So every time the price changes, we're going to get a new quantity demanded. So in this case, price is $10. That's a terrible line. When the price is $10, we're going to get something around, 18. When our price is $7, now we're going to get a quantity of 40. As the price increases, quantity demanded decreases. As the price decreases, quantity demanded increases. So quantity demanded means that we're talking about a single point on the line. So when I say the demand curve or demand in the market, I'm referring to this entire line, the entire function, the whole table. So demand represents all of the demand in the market, all of the buyers in the market. Quantity demanded refers to one single point. So at $7 or $7.20, our quantity demanded is 40. Or at $1.20, our quantity demanded is 90. So each individual point represents one price and one quantity. If you say that demand is increasing, you're saying that this whole line is going to move to a different part on our graph. Our whole equation is going to change. If you say quantity demand is increasing, that just means our price went down. So demand represents the entire line. Quantity demanded represents a single point on the line. So let's look at our class demand for Coca-Cola. So I want you to think for a minute about your reservation price for Coca-Cola. The most money you would be willing to pay for an ice-cold 12-ounce can of Coca-Cola. Now I want you to imagine that it's a hot day outside. Maybe it's 90 degrees. You are stuck outside in the sun for the next 3 hours, and you do not have any other beverages available. There's no water fountain, you don't have any drinks in your bag, you don't have any other access to beverage except there's just one vending machine selling Coke. And I want you to think about if you walked over to that vending machine, what is the highest price that you would be willing to pay under these circumstances? Now normally we don't think about it like this. You don't often calculate your reservation price for something. Typically we go and view the price and then just decide, is it worth it or is it not? Okay, so hopefully you've thought about your highest price. Now, usually we get something, for the high values, we get something in the range of, $5 to $10. People usually say $5 to $10 is the most. In a class of about 40 students, I'll probably get about 10 people who pick a number in this range. Then like $2 to $4, we usually get another 20 people. And around $1, we get another 10 people or so. There's often a few stragglers who are like, I don't care, I'll just be thirsty. So we'll have a few people who are willing to pay nothing for this. The answer that you picked depends upon your entire market condition for yourself, right? So it's hot outside, you're probably going to be thirsty, you don't have anything else to drink, you might be willing to pay more for this can of Coke because you don't have any alternatives. It has to do with your current income, your current level of preferences, how much you currently drink soda, how much you like soda. If you're allergic to caffeine, maybe you would pay nothing to this for this because maybe it would be dangerous for you. But the answers are going to change anytime one of those conditions change. So if we're talking about people from 100 years ago, would they be willing to pay $4 or $5 for a can of Coke? No, because for a lot of them, that might have been an entire day's wages. Where right now, modern times, you could make $100 to $200 a day. Right? So most of you probably did not say you'd be willing to pay $100 for a can of Coke. So it's relative, right? Anytime one of these scenarios change, your income changes, the weather changes, the location changes, any of those things, they're going to change your answer. It's going to change your reservation price. So how would your answer be different if you were at Disneyland instead? So you're at Disneyland, you're stuck outside, it's hot, you have to buy a beverage, you didn't bring anything with you. Generally, on average, are people willing to pay more for soda at Disneyland than they are other places in life? Yes, usually. And it's not because a can of Coke tastes better at Disneyland. It's not because you like Coke better when you're at Disneyland. It's because your cost, your reservation price, is going to change. For our buyers, reservation price includes the value that they get from it, plus the opportunity cost of doing alternative activities. If you're at Disneyland, you probably paid $200 to be there for one day. There's a, McDonald's right outside of Disneyland. You can go buy a Coke, large Coke there for $1 to $2. But it's going to cost you a lot. You're going to have to leave the park, walk over there, wait in line, come back in. You might waste an hour of time at Disneyland just to save $2 or $3 on a soda. And for most people, that's not worth it because their opportunity cost of being there is so high. You're wasting $20 an hour just to save $2 on a soda. Or what about if you were in the desert and you came across a vending machine with soda? How many of you would be willing to pay $10 then? Depends. Are you about to die? Are you dying of thirst? If you don't purchase this can of Coke, you might not survive. Then definitely you'd be willing to pay $10 or maybe $50 or $100 or any amount you could come up with just for survival. If it's cold outside, you're going to be willing to pay less for a cold can of Coke, but maybe you'd be willing to pay more for a hot drink. So your taste and your preferences, your needs, the value of a particular item is going to change depending on all these various market conditions. Whenever one of those things changes in the market, we would say that that's a shift in the demand curve, demand shift. So an increase in demand is when the demand curve is shifting to the right. Decrease in demand means that demand is shifting to the left. We're not going to say up and down because when we do supply and other graphs, it gets a little bit more confusing. So anytime you have a rightward shift, that means an increase. And we can actually see that if we look at points A, B, and C here on the graph. An increase in demand means that more people, or there's a higher quantity demanded at any particular price level. So at $6 on our original graph at point A, we had people willing to purchase 60. When our demand increased, so maybe we're at Disneyland now, at $6, you have maybe almost 110 people willing to pay $6. Or a decrease in demand is a shift to the left. So that would be like moving to point B. Demand has decreased. Previously we had 60 people willing to pay $6. Now we only have about 10. So it's going to be a horizontal shift to the right and to the left. What causes demand to shift? Changes in price of related goods, so complements and substitutes. Changes in consumer income. Changes in tastes and preferences. Changes in the population. And changes in buyer expectation of future prices. These are the general categories that we would say affect demand. If it's just a price change, so prices went from $8 to $6, we would just say that's a movement along the curve. So it's not an increase in demand. It's an increase in quantity demanded. Quantity is going to go from 30 to 60, but our entire demand curve is not going to shift. So to get a new line, an increase in demand or decrease in demand, we have to have something changing about the market. Complements are going to be related goods that you would purchase together. So in our Coke example, say this is our market for Coke, a complement might be a bag of chips. Typically you're hungry, you want a snack, you're going to get a Coke and some chips. Okay, so those things might go together. When the price of chips increases, this is going to decrease your demand for Coke. It's going to cause Coke demand to shift to the left. Why? Because if you purchase these things together, you always want to buy Coke and chips together. Then now, chips price has gone up, it makes it relatively more expensive for you to buy this bundle. And you may transition away from Coke to another combination of goods that gives you a higher level of satisfaction. substitutes would be something that you do instead of. So let's say instead of buying a Coke, you would buy iced tea. So if the price of tea increases, demand for Coke will also increase. Because now iced tea is relatively more expensive, means that Coke is relatively cheaper. People are going to demand more Coke. When income of consumers change, this also is going to affect demand. So as income goes up, it changes people's willingness to pay. If you're making $100 a day now, maybe you're willing to pay $2 for a Coke. When your income goes up to $20,000 a day, maybe you're willing to pay $50 for a Coke, right? So as income increases, demand is going to increase. As income decreases, demand is going to decrease. Taste and preferences are also going to affect demand. How much you like something determines how much you're willing to pay for it. This is really where marketing and advertising try to influence the demand curve. If they can get their customers to like something more, increase their value that they place on it, it's going to increase demand and increase willingness to pay. For example, let's say a new study came out that said if you drink a Coke before taking a test, you will get an A on that test. Demand for Coke is going to increase, right? Our tastes and preferences have gone up. Likewise, population changes. If population increases, demand is going to increase. Population decreases, demand is going to decrease. If you're starting a business, you want to be in an area where the population is growing because that means demand for all products will be increasing. Buyers' expectations of the future are also going to affect their purchases. Because we don't only want to pay the lowest prices today, we think long term, right? We want to pay the lowest prices overall throughout our lifetime. And so if we expect prices to be higher in the future, expect prices to go up, then we're going to increase our demand today. We want to buy more stuff right now when we think prices are lower, and we want to buy less stuff in the future when we think prices are going to be higher. So buyer expectations can actually cause real changes in markets today. Whether or not they were actually going to be correct doesn't matter, because what we think is going to happen influences our behavior and changes what happens in the future. So let's talk about a few different types of goods. So for instance, on the last slide I said when consumer income goes up, demand is going to go up for an item. That's only going to be true if it's considered a normal good. Okay, so a normal good is something where demand goes up as income goes up, or demand goes down as income falls. Examples for this could be clothing, restaurant meals, vacations. Most of the stuff that we buy every day is considered a normal good. An inferior good behaves oppositely. It's something where demand increases as your income drops, or demand decreases as your income rises. Inferior goods might be things like used clothing or instant ramen noodles, things that you might buy when your income is lower. It doesn't have to be true for everyone, it just has to be true on average. So for instance, I eat a lot of instant ramen noodles. I think they taste good. I like them. I like that they're cheap. And it doesn't matter that my income has gone up significantly since I was a college student. I still consistently eat ramen noodles on a regular basis. So it doesn't matter if this is true for everybody. It doesn't have to be a normal good for every person or an inferior good for every person. We're looking at the market as a whole. So what happens to the demand for instant ramen when average incomes go up? Okay, that is going to make it an inferior good or a normal good. We do also have some other oddly behaving goods. These are going to defy the law of demand and actually have an upward sloping demand curve. The first is going to be a Giffen good. So a Giffen good happens for something that's a very inferior good that takes up a large portion of a household's budget. Typically, this is going to be things like rice or potatoes, some sort of staple food item that takes up a large portion of a household's budget, especially in lower income households. So what's going to happen with a given good is the price is going to decrease, and we're going to see that the quantity demanded also decreases. This is going to be opposite of what we expect to happen in this market. It could be that a household spends half of their grocery budget on rice every week. The price of rice drops and they say, oh, we're going to buy less rice now. It's cheaper. We're going to spend more money on shrimp or chicken, right? Something else they would rather be eating. There are not a lot of examples of this happening in real life, so it has to be a very inferior good in a large portion of the budget. Veblen goods also defy the law of demand. They also have an upward sloping demand curve. Veblen goods are going to be luxury goods, something that has an excessively high price to make it a status-seeking good. Something where the higher the price, the more exclusive the item. So we're going to see an upward sloping demand curve. So as the price increases, the quantity demanded also increases. Example of this might be like a Birkin bag, which is a purse that often costs more than your college tuition, could be more than some houses in the United States. It's a very expensive bag. You're paying for the status, you're paying for the exclusivity. So Giffen goods and Veblen goods both have upward sloping demand curves, but they're going to be a very small sector of the market. This ends our discussion on demand. Our next video will look at supply.